Old man doing a podcast. Real weirdos. We have English degrees. Real weirdos. We talk about movies for way too goddamn long.
What a fucking bloodbath.
Yeah, what's your favorite movie?
Holy shit.
Yeah.
My God. You know what? I had seen this before. It had been quite a long time. It definitely left the impression of that it does, you know, that it's an insane bloodbath. But I was not remembering or quite prepared for just how fucking brutal this movie got.
Okay, so quick question.
Yeah. This is an Alex pick.
Is this movie good or is it terribly, terribly bad? Almost on the level of a Japanese dungeon siege King's Tale.
What?
Honest question.
Honest answer. The fuck you talking about, homie?
Let's set this up. We're talking about 13 Assassins, 2010 film from Takashi Miike, who's an interesting director because he does about 2 or 3 movies a year, and a lot of them are like children's television like movies and shows in Japan, like little magical girl shows. And then when he has the ability to make his own kind of movie, he does some of the most disturbing, bloody cinema you can see. Things like Ichi the Killer is insane. And Audition has one of the hardest left turns into horror that I've ever seen. And this is an Alex pick. So I'm insanely curious why you asked that question, because my answer is this movie is great. And I will get into that. But like, and I think Jeff agrees with me. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, wholly and completely. Like, I don't even know how you could ask that question. This movie is...
Okay.
I mean, we're at a very rare moment on the podcast that I hope was going to happen where I have a new favorite movie.
Interesting.
What?
Okay. Well, first, Alex, why do you ask that question?
So, this time watching it around, for some reason, there were moments where I felt like the dialogue was like weaker than it had been before. And somehow I like got hooked into this narrative about this movie that it was like, I don't know how to explain it. Just like extremely generic feudal Japan, end of feudal Japan, samurai revenge type story. And I was just, I don't know, I just was caught in this like critical fucking view of this movie, this lens. So,
well, where do you think you fall between those 2 points of it being amazing or it being like garbage?
I mean, I would say it's amazing because I've always held that like it's a great movie ever since I first saw it, and that's why I recommended it. But I don't know why it happened to me this time around. I guess that happens with movies sometimes.
It does. And it's an interesting question, the way you frame it, the way you frame your response to your own question. Because I think the first half, it definitely had some trouble sinking its hooks into me. I was like, wait a minute, what's going on? Who are they talking about? But that just happens when it's like a lot of foreign names. Like when you give me 20 names in Japanese in 10 minutes, I'm like, I can't even remember like American names in movies in the first 10 minutes, you know? So, but once you realize what the plot is, it's like, okay, this lord is a savage beast who is an awful, awful, horrifying monster of a human. We have to get a bunch of people together, our 13 assassins, our titular assassins, and go murder this motherfucker. And you're like, okay, I understand your plot. And then it's like 2/3 build up, and you're like, okay, where is this going? And then it leads to one of the most ridiculously brutal and extended battle sequences in cinematic history.
Yeah.
The level of blood is just fucking insane.
Now, is there a point where blood literally washes over a roof?
Yes.
I just have to ask that real quick.
Yeah, one of the guys, he's about to die, and he grabs one of the enemy soldiers and he like lights some dynamite or something.
Okay, that's
and
what I thought
it cuts
was.
back to the outside and the roof explodes and blood just gushes out. I was like, is that wine? Did they explode a wine barrel? But no, it was blood. It's 13 soldiers, 13 assassins, the shinobis, samurai. That's the word.
No, not shinobi. No, they're samurai. Yeah, not shinobi.
Yeah, samurai. Versus like 300 guys or like 150 guys, and it's just crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, this movie. Oh man, where do I begin? It's funny because Alex chose this movie, and like usual, I dominate the conversation, but I really didn't want to dominate. When I watched this movie, I was like, no, I'm gonna let Alex really explain this. And when it was starting to beginning, I was getting vibes from sorry, I'm horrible with names. What's that movie we watched recently, Jesse? I believe it was Chinese Shadow of. You wrote a review on it.
Oh, Shadow.
Oh, yeah, it's just called Shadow. Yeah.
It's funny, I actually have that literally pulled up because I was going to make a comparison in filmmaking. Because like while I do really love 13 Assassins, it doesn't have quite the style of a Yimou Zhang movie, who people will know from Shadow and Hero and all these other beautiful movies. But it's almost kind of a non sequitur anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I just kind of had the same vibes when it was beginning of like this very quick to begin story, and they're setting up these characters very quickly, and like you said, very much like this throwing at you of names. And I was actually like, I didn't want to get lost like I did with Shadow, so I rewinded the movie and I was like, all right, I really need to pay attention to these characters and their names. And I actually kind of wrote down a few of their names, or at least the spellings I could. And I was like,
oh, that's funny.
Clan leader of Awari clan, father of daughter who was killed. Like, because I was really wanting to make the links, because that, I think, fed to the...
It tricks you into thinking it's more complex than it is.
Yes, it does. It's so great.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's great because... So how I hate like subverting expectations, but I love it with when we watch Korean movies, Japanese movies, movies from other countries, because our expectations we can only be subverted because we just have no real basis of understanding of how they do their movies or how the movies are done regularly, unless it's like a specific director. So it's just so much fun to sit there and think that the movie's going to go into this like almost Game of Thrones style political drama, and then it just opens the floodgates on the blood and at points on the ridiculous comedy factor, which was super interesting.
Did you find it comedic?
Yeah.
What did you find comedic?
So there was 3 scenes. There was 3 comedic scenes in the movie. The first one was when the 2 dynamite experts, were trying to it was like Ocean's 13ing, explaining everyone's role. And it was like, you guys learned dynamite. And they were going and they thought it was going to blow up. And then it doesn't, and they're like looking at each other.
They're like hiding behind the rocks.
And then it blows as you're like, okay, cool. That's a very like Oceans. It's a very almost like American style film trope. Cool. Awesome. I'm with that. Yeah. And then the other one was the leeches, when he's like, oh, you got some friends. And he's got like the leeches on his neck, and then he's got like 20 leeches on his neck that are very badly CGI'd on there.
Yeah.
So, and then the third and final comedic scene, I guess you could count the big wave of blood as a comedic scene, but the true comedy scene, I think we can all agree, is the fireballs.
Okay, yes, thank you.
Yes,
I was going to say
right.
the
fireballs
fireballs
was so out of the left field. I was like, fuck is going? I literally thought the movie was taking a Kung Pao into the fist route. I was like, okay, here we go. I was like buckling up for like a musical number and all this crazy shit.
See, that's what I was saying.
That is definitely the moment where it took a hard left turn into like, what the fuck?
I was like, is this something they did in feudal Japan? I don't know. I know quite a bit about feudal Japan. I never heard about flaming bulls.
Yeah, that was hilarious. On the topic of like expectation, the way you expected this movie to play out, I didn't have that. Not just because I've seen it before, but because I know that there is a link to be drawn here to, and very obviously from the title, Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai,
Oh yeah.
which is one of the most legendary movies of all time. And this has somewhat of a similar structure. It's not one-to-one, but it is like assembling a group of samurai for a purpose and then fitting up a town to fulfill that purpose, and then a very extended battle at the end.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, see, I've never seen that, so for me, this was like my first exposure to this kind of format. It reminded me a lot, actually, of like the Yakuza games and a lot of like Rurouni Kenshin. It just reminded me of this is
Video
an
game
era.
reference for the episode.
Yeah, I love this era of Japan. I mean, of course, everybody does, but like the end of the Shogunate and the beginning of the Meiji era was just such a interesting time. I mean, my favorite anime of all time is probably Rurouni Kenshin, and it captures that world so well. And I mean, I don't know if you guys noticed, but there's a lot of attention to detail in this movie for like historical. I don't know, and just for like,
it's
gritty
also
context.
on the topic of Kurosawa. I was loving how mannered the filmmaking is, because it's like you don't really know what you're gonna get with Takashi Miike, because like I said, he does wild, wacky gore shit and stuff like Ichi the Killer, and he also does magical girl movies. So to have him have like, this is like, it feels like classical cinema. Like he knows what he's doing. He knows what he's trying to achieve. It's not necessarily exactly like Kurosawa, because, you know, filmmaking has evolved in 80 years, shockingly.
Yeah.
But it does have that style to it in a sense where it just looks good.
Yeah.
It's very well shot.
I was going to say almost the exact same thing. I have that in my notes. It's like it's close to mimicry of Kurosawa with a slight flair of Takashi Miike. And then
It definitely has the homage.
Yeah, and then at the end it goes full blown like stylistic, his own auteur type of direction. But the beginning, especially when he's gathering the different samurai and getting to know people, it was like I was watching Seven Samurai.
Yeah, it was like a manners drama in the beginning.
Oh,
There was
yeah.
so much focus on like the etiquette and like the calm, quiet scenes of like bowing and going through all of, I don't know, everything in this movie was so tactile. Like you could almost smell the sweat on the characters' like brows. Like you could almost smell like the wet floor of the dojos. Like when the apprentice to the main character has like one of the coolest names. Shinzaemon, yeah. His apprentice, when he's like doing his like his ritual, his little practices in the dojo.
The quiet guy.
Yeah,
that's like
yeah.
just a fucking stud.
Oh man, one of my favorite scenes when they were like, "Who are you?" And he was like, "I'm a Ronin."
Yeah,
and he just cuts
And
them
he just
down.
Cuts him down. He's crazy. Alex, I have this question burning, because in terms of casting, there was a moment. I mean, we're talking about the allusions here to Seven Samurai. When they meet the guy in the forest, who is like the trapper guy, did you also think that's the Toshiro Mifune character?
Oh, 100%.
Did you have that thought?
100%.
Yeah. It just completely is. You're like, that would have been Toshiro Mifune.
That is like the Japanese equivalent of when American cinema reaches back eventually, because they're rehashing everything, to something like Gone with the Wind, right? And you'll see some younger actress playing Vivian Lee's part. It'll be this weird like cultural signifier, and I think that's just it's really beautiful in American film, and I think it's beautiful that internationally film has come this far that it can do that. You said like 80 years, right? That's like exactly
something like that.
Toshiro Mifune's role.
There's also something going on with him at the end. And,
there is.
And I have questions about the end, because you see, like, he gets murdered pretty fucking clearly, and then he just comes back. Dude, he has an arrow through his neck,
Sword.
and
A sword.
has his guts like sliced open.
Nope.
No?
No, that doesn't happen. So when I'm sorry I'm being resistant on this, but because when that happened, when the sword went through his neck, the first thing that I said out loud was, "Oh, you could survive that," because of the way it kind of went through just like the side of his neck, and you can see when he cuts up, he has all the wounds still. He's not healed, and he's got blood running down his neck. And then that slice against his gut, I was like, okay, are his guts gonna fall out? And it was just like a little cut, and it started bleeding. So
I think regardless, you would not be in the spry shape that he was in at
I
the
definitely
end.
think there's something going on, but at the same time, they did a good job making you think at least there could be a possibility.
Well, it brings in this idea of, I don't know, whether he's like a trickster entity, like something not altogether human. And I was reading, I can't remember if this is the director's commentary or someone else's commentary. I think it was the director. But that decision was meant to possibly lead the audience into thinking that the other guy that survived, maybe he didn't survive. Like maybe this is some kind of afterlife or something like that. But I don't personally get behind that reading. I don't think there's much to support that.
So,
Yeah, the only thing I could see to support that would be when he was walking away, and he said to his wife, like if I don't come back, you'll see me in the festival of the dead. And he was the one who ends up surviving.
Yeah.
And since they made such a big deal about his departure and his death, that reading carries not much weight, but a teeny bit of weight.
So that part is interesting. After we talk about this, I have to ask you guys about another aspect of the movie, but we'll get there. Another character. So I read this a long time ago. Full disclaimer, this isn't my original theory, but I've carried it around in my head. So paraphrasing enough, and enough time has passed since I've seen it, that it's basically like my own. You know how he's the nephew of Shinza? Shinza being the main character.
Yeah.
He's the nephew, right? He's related to him by blood, I believe, in some way. So he leads this really privileged life where he's always gambling and drinking, and he's kind of like this wild spirit. And my theory is that when he leaves at the very end, that is like that part of him in that spirit, this like Japanese bandit archetype leaving, and he is like separated from him. There's someone who had this reading that they were like the same person, or they were bound together, and he began to see him more in his mind. Because towards the end, after he's included, right, and he's like, okay, we're all 13, the guy gets really excited, but only what's his face talks to him when they're alone.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's interesting. There's a lot of weird. It's great that a movie like this, which could be interpreted as just kind of like a Japanese political drama, has these kind of questions that can be asked. And I was just kind of popping around through the IMDb trivia, and apparently Takashi Miike claims that the final scene is open to interpretation, and that it's possible that Koyata really did die.
Okay, see, that's what I read.
Okay.
So it was the director.
That makes
so you're
sense.
substantiating that. Yeah.
That makes sense.
So the director has claimed that like this is a possible, and that makes more sense because of the fact that they made such a big deal about in particular his departure. And there was like another little piece of trivia that was like the two people that survive are the two people who originally weren't going to join the group. Like they were the two people who had the least true commitment to the cause.
It's cool too, actually, to think of it that way, because then he goes, I'm going to go to America, right? And get with a bunch of girls. Like, just that idea that, like, when you're dead or in heaven or in the next place or whatever you want to call it, you have this, like, attitude where you're just, like, purely, like, innocent and blissful and wishful in that moment.
Yeah, no, it was a very strange ending. I mean, yeah, it's like he seemed to take on that kind of blissful serenity as he's walking through this just field of carnage.
Yeah, a field of an entire town just covered in bodies and death and blood.
and it's like he's almost at peace with himself. But then there's a scene, and it ties to that, where it's at the very end, and you think he's gonna like put his sword into the ground or cast it away, you know, being like, "This is my final fight as a samurai." Mm-hmm. But instead, he tries to throw it and can't, and then walks away towards the camera. And right before it ends, he's smiling. So there is some serenity or some kind of finality. Like he was able to close that chapter of his life and put like a nice bow on it, even if he had died. And I just want to point out that I laughed out loud when they were like, "Oh, It's not 70 men, it's over 200. I was like, "Oh my God, more meat for the meat grinder."
Oh
like,
man.
I got so excited.
That whole fucking battle, it's interesting because there's two parts of my brain, and I think the movie knows this. I think the director knows this. It's like people revel. They like to revel in this level of carnage and bloodshed, especially when it's samurai, because that's just awesome. But it goes so hard, and it goes so far that it becomes one of those movies and scenes that are like, holy shit, the horrors of war. Like we get that kind of stuff in like Saving Private Ryan and war movies more in particular, but this one definitely crossed the line into that. And so you're at the same time as reveling in it, you're like, holy shit.
Towards the end of the movie, it definitely is like gets into this war movie type feeling, especially when they get split up into pairs and they start forming these like relationships with each other like right before they're about to die or be killed. Yeah,
I loved that dynamic. That was such a cool dynamic.
It was almost like the final scene of like Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah.
They had these little splinter groups
exactly.
of the main group, and they were all like trying their best to hold off their own little wave of enemies, and eventually like they all succumb to the enemies.
That old man that they had with them that would make those like really crazy faces, and the camera would just stop for a moment and like that guy was badass. That guy was
he
hard.
was like, if anyone plays like a Japanese mobster, I mean, he has to have the role every time. Like he looks so out of place because he looked like he was supposed to be like chomping on gabagool. And
seriously, is like Japanese
so strange.
Soprano.
Yeah, it was weird, but I don't know. There were some genuinely uncomfortable scenes, like that scene. With
my God, when they set up the bad guy.
Wait, so I want to hold on. So I was gonna talk about this. Can we talk about Lord Natsunaga real quick?
Yeah,
from like
he's
start
a big part of this
to
movie.
like from his introduction to his then most pathetic like death scene.
Yes, I love it.
What's the first scene where they set him up? Are they just talking about him?
Yeah, that's the scene with the girl with no limbs.
That's one of them. There's one. Yeah, he has like
that's the
former
first scene.
sex slave that he abandoned. Is this girl with no limbs, and she's just like naked, and it's fucking horrifying.
Oh yeah, I was
they
eating
put
lunch.
The paintbrush in her mouth, and like have her write, and she's like crying blood as she's writing the words "total massacre" on the paper. So it's like covered in blood. It was really impactful.
She writes Mina Karoshi, which means all murdered, which is strange that they chose that.
Interesting.
That is interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah, they changed it for very much. You can tell they changed. Total Massacre has like a much more like theatrical effect to it, as in All Murdered has much more of a contextual effect because he asks her specifically what happened to the village. So she responded, "All murdered," and that makes more sense as far as like the context of a conversation. Nobody like is that dramatic.
I think I like the translation more because it just. I don't know. It adds a certain impact, especially at the end when he brings it back up and holds it up to him. Like total massacre, because that's what this is at the end. It is a total massacre. It's insane.
Yeah, it's definitely was a good choice to change it.
Yeah, you also have him like shooting arrows at little girls, like murdering children, and he rapes the guy's wife and like murders him, and then she commits suicide. Like this movie's brutal.
Yeah,
this dude is like a genuinely like I love genuinely good villains that are like that are brutal, but like have a kind of a not motivation, because he was actually quite a hollow character, because you don't really get much context about like who he is besides the fact that he's like the adopted brother of the current shogun
until like the end, really.
Yes, but like, yeah.
Well, you have this interesting dimension to him where it's not just like a personal horror. You can see it as like a burgeoning historical horror, because what's happening in the context of Japan at this time is it's an age of peace. And he's like a warlike monstrosity in an age of peace. And at the end, he's like loving the massacre, and he's like, we need to bring back the age of war. Like that would be a great thing. And it also speaks to the sort of samurai code that surrounds him, you know, not necessarily in himself, but those that serve him, because all these people see, all these samurais that serve him see what he is. Like, they're not blind to it, obviously, like you can't be, but they still just choose to serve. They're like, it's not a samurai's role to question or anything like that. It's just to serve your master, even if your lord is the worst person ever.
That little side like storyline that they had with Hanbei and Shinza was really, it was touching, but it was also it was like just morbid, solemn. You knew that one of them had to die and they were going to kill each other. And I thought that they set up their implied friendship at one point very well.
Yeah, I mean, they did. They set up the final fight between them was really like a great fight. And I mean, all the fights, this movie is, I know, right? This movie is brilliantly choreographed. The fights feel, especially the one-on-ones, they feel like they're striking each other with some force on those strikes. Like, they're really going after it. And the swords don't look like rubber. They look like they're like a composite. So it gives them a much more rigid appearance and doesn't take you out of the film. But
no, the movie looks very realistic. The only thing that didn't was the flaming bowls.
Yeah,
yes, the flaming bowls
weird.
was very out of nowhere.
That was like, I don't know. So the thing about Natsunaga, at least, is that it gives the movie this really strange dynamic for me where it's like he's so evil that I buy in right away to the mission. And that's what like really gets me into the movie. They just did a really good job, I feel like, of uniting audience hatred.
Yes.
With, you know, the plot as well in the characters. It's akin to Nurse Ratched in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Milos Forman in that movie did a really good job. So yeah, I don't know. He was just such a fucking...
Dude, you as the audience are set up very early being like, okay, this guy needs to die.
Yeah.
For sure. Like, I totally hear you. It's
Well, to speak back to what Jesse was saying, to kind of combine both of your ideas, I kind of feel like he was definitely a metaphor for the coming of a new age and the dying of an old age, and like the last final kind of death rattle of the shogunate and of the samurai. I mean, you have to think about the samurai as a people, because they were peasants who rose up to become rulers and lords and establish an entire dynasty and code of honor. It's almost like it's a lot like English like chivalry and knights. You have this entire lifestyle that has been created for these men that is just slowly falling apart and collapsing.
It's a really good point, because Natsunaga he plays this role of like that. There's always like you said in the death rattle, you know, like, make Japan great again, you know, like, shut the fuck up. You were never around for any of that shit. And now you're like looking in on a wondrous boy, you know, just like, oh, we should bring back the age of war.
The age of war.
And you're such a child. You've like barely spilt any blood or done anything when it's been a fair fight. You murder children. Like,
there was a point in this movie, because I couldn't remember how it ended or anything, but I was like, this is so bleak that I was almost expecting, or at least would not have been surprised if the assassins failed. Like, if the bad guy had won.
absolutely expecting them to fail. I was expecting the main guy to like sit on his throne or sit on his seat next to the shogun and like just like walk in like as if nothing happened. But he took quite a turn, and I'm doing a little like side research while we were talking, and apparently there was a Japanese cut and an international cut of this movie.
Yeah, it's like 20 minutes longer.
Okay, so which version did we watch?
We watched the shorter one.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I could not find for the life of me
because apparently
the original version.
It goes more into the bandits' background, and another interview with the director and all of like the Japanese people who watch this movie and kind of diagnose it. Yeah, they say that the bandit represents yokai, or a forest spirit. And
yeah,
so therefore
I mean that
he's
makes
immortal.
complete
Yeah.
sense. That totally tracks. Like I was saying before, there's something definitely like liminal about him. He's definitely like a trickster character for sure.
Yeah.
So I like that. I wish we saw that version, but
Yeah, so apparently they have much more, like, there's much more background into that. And apparently it also says that like they destroy much more of the village in the original cut as well. In the Japanese
More?
cut.
oh
Damn.
man, more extra brutality, extra explosivity,
So-
extra destruction.
Whereas it kind of looked like at the end of our version, it looked like, oh, okay, they can clear out the bodies and, you know.
Yeah, I know that the first time I saw it, I knew about this, and I was able to track down the 2 hour 20-minute version, the original version. But I mean, wherever that file ended up 10 years ago is lost to time. So
Yeah. But yeah, that was just some little side digging and some interesting little
That's cool.
factums.
That's
Yeah.
cool.
do you guys have a favorite character?
Oh, I don't know, Alex. I want to hear yours as an avid fan of this movie.
I mean, it's hard because you always love the guy that survives, right? Because I feel like each person in that whole like Freudian self sense, you always see yourself as the main character in some way. So I do like the nephew. I always love Japanese bandit archetypes. I think they're some of the coolest characters in all of like shows, books, whatever. Like it's just a cool archetype. To
The
me.
bandit-y monkey man,
Yeah.
who's played by not Toshiro Mifune.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Think like Mugen in Samurai Champloo, if anyone's seen that.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
But I want to say that my favorite character, for no other reason than just like pure fighting style, I like this dude, was the dude with this long staff, the chubbier older guy.
Oh, the spear.
Yeah, the spear
Yeah, the
guy.
spear. He was like, what do you want to do with this money? And he was like, oh, I'm gonna, fuck some bitches and whores and bury my wife, and bury myself, pay my debts, and there you go. And it was like
I
kind of
love
cool.
his motivation. He's like, I believe in your mission, but I am probably gonna die. So give me 200 real so I can go experience the things that I haven't gotten to experience in this peasant warrior life of mine.
Yep, and then like
He just had like a nice, like, I don't know, like jovial energy to him.
but there's like a respect there as well, because he's like I'm gonna settle my debts and like bury my wife and myself. Like he was gonna take care of business and then experience the pleasures. So there was
And
like
then take care of business.
Yeah. Some serious
TCOB, baby.
serious business.
TCOB, yeah. I don't know. I loved the most badass guy. We talked about him a little bit earlier. I
dude,
don't remember
the
his name.
strong silent type.
Yeah,
I
just
think-
because like the way that he carried himself in those action scenes where he just destroyed everybody was amazing.
Yeah.
I didn't see him die. I guess I missed it.
Yeah, he
maybe it was
dies
like a
with his-
blink and you miss it kind
Yeah,
of thing. But
it
at the end, I
was.
was like waiting for him to come back.
Yeah, he died with his apprentice, because they do that scene where his apprentice is dying, and like they do that really cool camera cut where like his apprentice is looking kind of like horizontal, and they turn the camera horizontal but like vertically, so you kind of have to tilt your head. 'cause it's
Yeah,
almost, like,
that was an
seeing-
interesting shot.
Yeah, and then like he says like master, and then he dies, and then that guy dies like right after. Like,
Yeah.
it's, like,
Yeah, well, I
literally
guess
a
when
half
you
a
have
second.
like 500 people who are all dressed like samurai with top knots covered in blood, can be easy to miss.
What are you trying to say?
No, even at the beginning of the film, it's hard to keep up because not only do you have that cultural barrier, I'll just talk about it right now because, Japanese, I'm everything. I could talk about whatever. But like when everyone's haircut is the same and they're all essentially wearing the same clothing, it's even harder in a Kurosawa movie because it's in black and white usually. And I'm like, God damn. This is really hard to figure out, unless it's his, two principal actors that he always uses in every film.
Yeah, right.
It's really the voices for me, because a lot of them, I swear, are voice actors in animes that I've watched. They just have that great commanding tone and like deep, just resonance to their voice. Like I recognize a lot of their voices, so I put a lot of their like faces to their voices, so that kind of linked it up for me.
When you get out of the cutesy, like Tokyo popular way that people think that Japanese people speak, Japanese can be incredibly harsh sounding language, like
can be very authoritative.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very like somber and grounded.
Yeah.
There's definitely an aspect of that kind of dramatic effect that they put on their voices for sure, for like almost like theatrical purposes.
Mm-hmm.
You see,
it almost feels like their voices are just imbued with this ideal of like respect and honor.
Yeah,
or something like that.
It's done really well. But for me, my favorite character, just to finish that thought up for you, is would be the nephew, Koyata Kiga. He's played by Yusuke Isaya, who is Kenshin in the Rurouni Kenshin live action movies.
Oh,
are those good?
Yeah, for me. Do you like Rurouni Kenshin?
I think I saw it when I was like 14. I don't really remember.
Yeah, I mean, I would say watch the anime to completion and then watch the movies, because then it'll be like, oh, this is fun. This is like linking along to the anime I love. But watching it in a vacuum, you're gonna be like, those swords are looking pretty styrofoamy.
I had to look to see if Takashi Miike directed those, but he did not. He directed he directed JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Diamond is Unbreakable Chapter 1 though.
And he did Audition, right?
Yeah, I mean that was my joke reference, but yes, he did Audition. Have you seen Audition?
Of course.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So you guys know what I'm talking about with that one.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's like why I was like expecting something very different for this movie.
Yeah, this movie is interesting, right? Because it gets into that little channel that we're talking about of like almost tribute, not only to Japanese history, but to the history of Japanese filmmaking, right? It would be no different than Spielberg talking about something that like John Ford did, or fucking David Lane, or something like that.
Because this is so funny, I'm gonna link you guys right now. Just look at the poster for his latest movie.
Nice.
You describe that for our audience, Jeff?
Yeah, I'd love to. This is probably what will be considered for me just like solid beat off material for the next.
Oh my god!
Jesus.
No, this is
no, they're way too young.
I mean, who knows? They're ageless. They're timeless.
They're ageless.
And
this poster looks like a cake that would make you sick. It's so sweet.
So this poster is bright pink, and it has 4. I'm going to say women, because to me, they look like they're trying to pass as younger than they are. So I'm going to say 4 women dressed in what they're supposed to be like children, little princess dresses, covered in dollar store toys.
Yeah.
From the context, I cannot suss out anything to do with this movie or plot.
No.
Beyond
Do you want to
fact-
read the title?
In Japanese?
Yeah, go for it. You don't have to.
I mean,
it's insanely long and convoluted. I just
can't
wanted
even
to trap you.
begin to the font is awful.
Well, you can see it on the IMDb page. It's at the top.
Oh, okay. Oh, God. Okay, yeah, I'm not even going to try.
Damn it. I tried, everybody. I tried. I'm not going to say it.
No.
There's no way.
All right. I've never even heard of this conjugation in Japanese before. Gekihōban? Like, that is insane. Porisu, X usually means and. Senshi, oh, fuck that word, dude.
Rabu Paturina.
Rapaturina. Yeah, there we go. I had to hear it
Kaito
once.
Kara no Chosen. Rabu de Papato Taiho Seo. It's like the longest title I've ever seen.
Well, it looks like 2 titles and then a subtitle. Because it's first title, X, second title, exclamation point, end of sentence, dash, and then subtitle. So it's like Indiana Jones versus the Hulk Revengeance.
Yeah, but longer.
But much longer.
Yeah,
so this is got quite off topic. But
it has. It absolutely has.
I wanted to talk about the detail though, real quick in this movie. Because you can make a movie like this and you can really overlook, and I'm not talking about historical detail or anything like that. You can really overlook the texture of a movie like this and really just make it about the story, and it'll still be great. But they didn't. They thought about the texture. Like, there's great little scenes in the dojo when him and his apprentice are talking, and the bokken that are hanging on the wall, the wooden training swords, are like worn in different ways. Like, some of them are like worn more at the tip, some of them are worn more in the middle. When like when Shinza and what's his name?
Oh, Hanbei
and Shinza, their final fight and they're clashing swords, those close-ups, you can see like the nicks and chips and like divots in the swords.
I noticed that too.
That was really, really great attention to detail, like how a sword wears very quickly in a battle. And it doesn't just stay like this like perfect blade.
Yeah.
It becomes serrated and the cuts become so much more like disgusting and devastating because they become just these like bread knives that you're fighting with.
Ugh.
Well, if it gets too mutilated, you can just pick up a sword from any wall or ground.
Just anywhere.
There's just swords
amazing.
everywhere.
I loved that, actually. That was cool.
That scene was amazing. That was just like, I love it. He was like, he would only pick up the second sword to do a killing blow and then drop it immediately. So he was using like the momentum from the run that he was doing to pick up a sword, kill someone, and keep moving. It was so fucking like hero. It was so anime. It was so like one of the very fantasized moments in the movie. It was really, really great. And it was this movie drops in the humor. It drops in the high fantasy, the mythos at the perfect time. It's like a great cake. All of the elements just mix well together, and even the dumb little comedy moments. I mean, this movie, really, in a nutshell, is kind of like just like Ocean's 13 in Japan. It's like, we got to assemble the team, and we got the demolitions expert, and we got the guy with the grudge.
If that ended in the most like horrifying bloodshed.
Yeah, if it ended in like them failing the heist, and then all the Ocean's guys just like decided to mass murder the entire casino and all the civilians in it.
I kept thinking about while I was watching it. I kept thinking like, because when I watch movies like this, I'm always thinking about how crazy it must have been to make. Because I know one of the cool things about the director is that he uses practical effects whenever possible. He's not a big fan of CGI. I thought the bulls were probably CGI.
The bulls and the leeches were CGI.
But none of like the battle stuff. I think all that blood was definitely real blood. I mean, quote unquote real.
Yeah, movie blood.
Movie blood, but it's like it boggles my mind like how crazy that would have been to shoot and to make it look so good for $6 million as well, which is nothing.
Do you think they actually
it's
blew
just
up
crazy.
that building?
I mean,
it looks like it.
Yeah.
It looks like they built a whole fucking town and then gradually destroyed it.
It really looked like they blew up that building like legitimately. Like, the way it landed and everything was just too perfect. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there was very little CGI in this, which is
even miniature, like
fantastic
ways of miniature. I feel like the building was like full size.
No, I think they blew up I think they just blew up like the full size building. I
Yeah.
don't think that was a miniature.
That was
at
the
all.
last
Yeah.
shot they did in the movie.
Yeah, I
They're
think
like,
that-
all right, we got our battle scenes. We got all our footage. Now let's like cover it all in blood again. Fresh paint of blood.
Some
And then
poor,
blow it up.
some poor like PA or fucking interns just eating his lunch in there. No one told him.
Right. A geyser of blood shoots out of the ceiling. They're like, oh shit.
Is that part of the movie? Like, was that just like one of our dummies?
Oh, somebody did their research.
Yeah.
I guess that is how they actually blow up.
But yeah, the movie is like, I don't know. It's just a production, especially from that. I want to say like hour 20-minute mark when the battle starts. And I was gonna ask you guys this because I think about Dungeon Siege and that ridiculously long battle scene that was so visually
It's like the most
like
boring scene ever.
epileptic. Yeah, like it was just like it was just vomiting all over my eyeballs.
One of the points that I made in that is like action isn't just things happening. Action has to tell a story, and that's what makes it interesting.
Yeah.
Like then The Name of the King, the problem was like there was no ebb and flow. There was no poetry to it at all. There was no story being told. Whereas this, even though it's like 45 minutes of kinetic, brutal action,
Yeah.
it's going places and it's telling not just one story. There's like an overarching story where they're trying to get to the main bad guy, which they finally do at the end. But there's all these miniature stories going on at the same time. Like you said earlier, there's these little brotherhood elements forming between like when two of them have to meet up and like try to save each other from getting overrun. And it's
Yeah.
like, and you see the gradual degradation of the town. You see more and more bodies, more and more bloodshed, more and more just destruction of the town when all of their devices go off and stuff like that.
It's so cool to see these like giant wooden contraptions fall into place. And I don't know, like I don't think it's stupid or anything like that. Like the bulls, yeah, I was like, okay, what's happening here? But thank God it only lasted for like maybe 2 seconds, right?
We keep going back to that, but it was just so strange.
Yeah, it was.
That they released the flaming bulls
know.
to just bowl over all these guys.
I tried to look up if that was like an ancient, like, or like a feudal Japanese tactic. Nothing. I couldn't find anything about releasing flaming bowls.
Well, you know, speaking of video games, Sekiro has a boss in it that it is like a flaming bull. And it's like that. It has like these weird barrels on it, and its like back is on fire.
I want to know. So maybe is that like so maybe that's just something that is a reference, or maybe Sekiro is nodding to 13 Assassins.
That would be sick.
Yeah,
I mean,
the problem in trying to figure it out is like this movie's not popular in the way that something like Seven Samurai is. Like there's not a whole lot of information you can find about it. Even the IMDb page has like 5 things or something like that.
that's why I chose
Like
it too.
Oh yeah.
Compared to, because originally, for the people listening, I was going to choose Seven Samurai. But then, you know, in a quick moment of reflection, I just thought, you know, so much has been said and talked about with Kurosawa. I mean, he's such a titan of film. So I decided to go with something that was, I felt like, kind of akin to it, but a little more recent.
And also, like, I'm not sure how much we can add to the conversation of Seven Samurai.
Yeah.
I think there are people who are way better at film analysis to explain why that movie's great than us. I mean, obviously, we have our thing that we do, and we can talk about anything, but I think I agree with your decision to go for this instead. And I don't know. So Jeff hasn't seen any Kurosawa films. What would be the one to like break him into it? I would think like Rashomon would probably be my vote. It's much more, it's quicker and it's more digestible and more like easily emblematic of his style than like delving right into the 4-hour Seven Samurai.
I would do that one, or I would definitely do Throne of Blood, which is...
Yeah, I saw Throne of Blood.
Oh, okay. Well, I think we've
Yeah, I
talked
saw that.
about this before.
Yeah, because we did that before Macbeth.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then definitely Rashomon, because like you said, it's maybe the
That movie is perfect.
tightest movie I've ever made. Like, I don't mean that in the, you know, like, oh, that shit's tight. Like, vernacular. I mean, like the way we use it here on this
Yes.
podcast. But
It is a efficient film.
Yeah.
Not one moment of that is wasted or extraneous. It tells its story so tightly and so perfectly and is just amazing. So I'm definitely a fan of doing Rashomon at some point.
yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. I mean, from what you guys say, and whatever. I mean, obviously Kurosawa is a legend, and I have heard of him like extensively. So
Yeah.
I just never.
It's a hard
got
name
around.
to not hear if
Yep.
you're swirling around in the movie dimensions.
So I'm down.
Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
13 Assassins. I'll let
Definitely.
you guys say more about it if you want to, but
No, I really like. I was watching this movie, and I was really into it, and I was thinking to myself, like, where can I find more of this? Like this gritty, realistic, grounded Japanese drama.
that also apexes into an insane battle.
Yeah, dude. I know the perfect movie for you. Came out early 2000s. Little guy named Thomas Cruise and Ken Watanabe.
Oh,
It's
the
called
last of the Mohicans.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Really? I thought that movie was like ridiculous, like
We should do an episode on that.
exploitation. Like
That movie is fucking bonkers. But
Last Samurai.
yeah,
You're talking about?
yeah.
I saw that movie so many times when I was a kid. I have it on DVD. I don't remember it like at all though now.
I mean, it
R.I.P.
fits the
Paul Mooney.
criteria. Yeah. R.I.P.
Does it get
Paul
crazy
Mooney.
bloody or anything?
Towards the end, I mean, it's about like the American imperialistic outreach towards Japan and the split that it created with the people that were like, no, we want to stay with like our way and just have our emperor. But then the emperor was being persuaded by the other side of Japan, who was like already wearing Western style suits and cutting their hair all short, and we're like, no, we're gonna go like this American way. And it was right around the time of the Civil War, so new advancements in weapons had been made, like rifled barrels came into play. It wasn't you weren't just shooting a musket, and praying that it hit the guy. The Gatling gun, artillery, things like that. And Tom Cruise and his boys roll up.
Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise and his
I just
boys.
love like I know that the meaning of the title is The Last Samurai plural, like it's about the last of the samurai.
Yeah.
But just having like that title and then the poster
Yeah.
or the DVD cover or whatever is just Tom Cruise, you're like, "Oh, yeah, Tom Cruise is the last samurai."
Yeah.
Sure. Sure, Hollywood. If you say so. It's like it falls in with like The Mexican starring Brad Pitt
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or it's just funny.
That movie poster of him just sitting down on the curb. You're like, who's this white dude?
He's the Mexican.
Yeah.
man.
Yeah, he is the Mexican.
But yeah, man, 13 Assassins. It's a wild ride. It starts off pretty slow.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very mannered and dark. It's definitely very dour and dark. There's not a lot of levity. I mean, Jeff has stated, there are moments of it, but it takes a while to get to that. But man, if you're a fan of your movie violence, especially when it's like awesome samurai stuff, this movie is in a league of its own.
Yeah. It's
Like,
for
it's
you.
one of the most wild, over the top, and yet somehow serious and impactful
Mm-hmm.
action sequences I've ever seen.
Nice.
And I'm glad that you brought it back.
Nice.
Glad you brought it back into my world because I had forgotten how awesome this movie is.
Yeah, it definitely satisfies that craving, right? When you just need some go-to action, like slashing down the bad guy at all costs.
Oh, this movie has entered my top 10, like for sure.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's so satisfying as well when they finally get that bastard.
Oh,
because
yes.
it's earned. They earn it. This isn't like the end of like Goldfinger or something, you know?
No, and they roll his ass in the mud.
Oh, yeah.
Like they make him. I've never seen a character go from clean to dirty so quickly in my life. Like he gets stabbed and he's immediately covered in mud and blood the second
Yeah.
he hits the ground.
And he becomes a different character.
I
Yeah.
know.
Immediately,
It's creepy.
which is
It's really, really
wild.
unsettling. I hated
No,
that scene.
I loved it. I think because
Oof.
he represents this rising of this new era in Japan that is weak and frail and fragile and just cruel on the exterior, cruel to its people, cruel to its servants, cruel to everyone. Literally the reason the samurai rose up in the first place, and yet they're a dying race and they can do nothing but like grasp meagerly at the throat of this new
Jeff,
era.
Samurai aren't a race, okay? You racist.
No, but okay.
I know what you're saying, though, Jeff.
Da-da-da-do.
Yeah, it's like
All right, I'm done.
no,
Your boy's done.
it's just disgusting when he says like, "Oh, thank you for giving me my most exciting day." It's just like interesting. It's like almost too much is given to you and to your character. Like, no, I didn't want you to have the most exciting day of your life as your last day, because doesn't that actually kind of sound great? I mean, the most exciting day of
he's
your
reveling
life.
in it.
Yeah, like, no, I want you to die like slowly and terribly. But there was that moment when he was in the dirt, and I was like, yes. And ace acting all throughout the film, I will say.
Oh yeah,
Like,
we haven't given that enough credit, but it's immaculately acted, directed. The movie looks great. It's everything about it, technically and performance-wise, is fantastic.
Yep, it's a solid piece of art. This film, I was thoroughly impressed with the whole thing, top to front, top to bottom.
Solid, unique, beautiful, impactful, brutal piece of art.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hell yeah. Go watch it. Go
I'll
watch it on your Netflix or wherever your movies are found these days. So before we wrap up, I know it's only been a couple of days since we recorded, but you guys see anything interesting?
No, not from me on my end. I been working this new job, so
Yeah, Jeff got a cool new job, so he's busy with that.
Yep.
Alex, you got anything?
Yeah. TV show, like I usually do. I feel like I've been doing a lot of TV shows, but it's called Ted Lasso. A lot of people have probably heard about it.
Little known show.
Yeah.
I've never heard of this, legitimately.
It
You heard
won
of Ted Lasso? Really?
It won a bunch of Emmys this year, just recently, a few weeks ago, and did Best Comedy Series and some like supporting actor things and writing and whatnot. I'm always talking about like the death of this like postmodern cynicism on this podcast, and this show really takes up the mantle as far as like this new direction of being funny without needing to being like so negative, I guess, or being just a dick. I don't know. It's interesting, right? Because sometimes it's hard because you get these shows that are like really positive and glowing and things like that and feel good, and you're like, okay, this is kind of a waste of my time. But it's starting to be a more popular trend, and people are starting to watch it a lot more. But I also think it's just incredibly funny.
Well, all right. If that sounds like it's up your alley, then scope that out. New TV show to watch. I am going to do a little book report. It's been a little while since we done one of these, but I continued my ascent through the Guy Ritchie verse.
Oh, God.
Still determined to do that, and I will eventually get through it. But I watched The Man from U.N.C.L.E. I was going to do a book report on this with Jeff in its own segment, but he got busy. So, I watched The Man from U.N.C.L.E. It's kind of like, it's like his version of James Bond kind of deal, but it feels more hokey and silly and light even than James Bond, which is by design, I believe, because it's based on an old TV show from like the 60s or something like that. Some old British like spy show. So it definitely has that tone. Has Henry Cavill, Armie Hammer, Alicia Vikander, and I thought it was fun. It's a fun movie. It definitely is not going to leave a lasting impression, but it's like if you dig that kind of like cheeky spy comedy with decent action, I definitely think like up to and including it, because I haven't seen anything after it, but he's doing pretty well with action in this movie. Is fairly impressive in terms of Guy Ritchie, because he's generally not like an action director, but I guess he did this after Sherlock Holmes. So I guess he learned some lessons. You've seen this movie, right, Alex?
Yeah, I actually was gonna say I like this movie a lot. I think it has a cool little. I like the style of it, and like you said, it not only does it have this kind of spy comedy thing to it, it's like it gives me like a Austin Powers vibe almost, without getting too ridiculous or like into the actual comedy vein. Something about it, it's like this cool little dress up kind of movie. It's like a period piece, you know? So
yeah, it's a solid, quippy action movie. It definitely feels like it lends itself to being directed by Guy Ritchie.
yeah, it has that style.
It has that style. It's not Lock, Stock, and Snatch. It's definitely its own thing. And I think what was missing from it for me is like a really strong central performance. Like the actors do a good job, Henry Cavill and Armie Hammer. I think it's the writing. Like nobody really stole the show. But when it was done, I was like, okay, that was fun. Like I would watch more movies about this team, like doing 60s CIA, KGB operations.
Yeah.
And it also has two of our favorite actresses on the show.
Yep.
Alicia Vikander and Elizabeth Debicki.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah, from Tenet.
Oh, I forgot she was in that. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you want to see Elizabeth Debicki playing a Bond villain, it's a good movie for that too. So that's my book report on The Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Nice.
It's pretty good. Yeah, I liked it.
It sounds like something I would definitely enjoy.
You might, man. You like Guy Ritchie movies when they're good.
I do.
Yeah. Well, that's us for this week. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you to my co-hosts.
Of course.
Yeah,
anytime.
thanks.
Anytime.
This was a fun one. Thanks for recommending it, Alex.
Yeah. I'm glad you liked it so much. I was scared of your criticism on this one.
No, this one was a classic, instant classic.
Nice.
Were you scared? Did you think we might not like it?
No, that was just some lighthearted banter to end the episode.
Okay. I love that. I love that it's become one of Jeff's favorite movies. I love it when that happens.
Yeah.
You show someone something that you love and they're instantly glom onto it in the same kind of way.
No, it was amazing. Yeah.
All right, people. We'll see y'all next time.
Bye-bye.
See you later.
Chicka chaka chapo. Now our podcast is done, and we have to run. We know it is sad, but we had so much fun. Don't be bereft, Jesse, Alex, and Jeff. We'll be back real soon. The Real Weirdos. We talk about movies for way too goddamn long. Bo 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 bo.